Hello and welcome back to the garden vlog, and it's been really busy. I've been away for a couple of days, so today I've come back and there are two really important jobs that we're going to focus on today. Firstly, we're going to be transplanting the brassicas into this bed, and then over here, those are where the leeks are going. This here is our brassica seed bed. The first two brassicas I'm going to transplant are both kale, so we've got blue Scotch and red winter. But before we lift these out of this seed bed, I've got to get the bed ready for them to go in. But we don't want to confuse this with the knowledge of brassicas liking a really firm soil to grow in, which is right because they'll fall over otherwise. But what we're trying to do is to make sure it's really easy to work with the soil so we can transplant the brassica seedlings straight in, and then we'll be standing around the plants to firm up the soil just to help make sure that they'll survive any gales or breezes during the winter months. About 5 to 10 minutes before lifting the brassicas, it's a really good idea to give them a really good soaking because this will just help separate the roots better. I recently lifted the covering of this raised bed, so there were barely any weeds, but any ones that are here, I'm just going to pull out with my hand. By the way, I want to share with you something really exciting, which is easily a top 3 highlight of the vegetable gardening year, and that's the fact that we've got peas, and I'm so happy about that. They have no comparison to the peas that you get in the shop, absolutely none at all. I've planted 5 rows of blue Scotch kale, and you can see that they're beginning to wilt, and this is completely natural when you're transplanting brassicas, especially if you're using it that method where they're not in individual pots and you have to dig them out of the ground. They will start wilting, but as long as you give them enough water at the start, they'll start poking back up. So what I'm going to do now is, before they wilt any further, is to go around with my feet and firm down the ground. This bed here was where we had our kale and our purple sprouting broccoli over winter, and then in late spring and early summer we had some amazing harvests on them. And what was really nice was to have kale flower heads. Those were really tasty. So those have gone out. I pulled those out last week, and now what I need to do is get this ready for the leeks. And because the soil is very firm and compacted, I'm going to have to dig this over, and I try and avoid digging when possible, but I feel that if it means that we'll get a better quantity of veg, because at the moment, if you're planting into something as solid as this ground, especially leeks, they're not gonna swell as effectively. And even though I am striving for no dig, I don't have the huge volumes of compost needed for this at the moment. So I'm just gonna dig this over, give it a rake. I might mulch it with something though, and then we can get started with transplanting the leeks. I've dug over and raked out this raised bed, so it's almost ready for planting. The only thing I need to do now is to use this board. So this board both allows me, because these beds are quite wide, to walk over the raised bed and to spread out my weight, but also it's great for flattening the earth, because what you want to do is to use a dibber, so I'll be using a dibber, to create holes about 6 to 8 inches deep. And what this means is that when you put your plant in, after I've been separating them in the bucket of water, you put in the seedling, the leek seedling, and then when you give it a water afterwards, after you've transplanted them, the water will take the soil down into the hole and into the roots. And what this means is that the roots won't dry out. You give it a really good watering, but also the hole is still there, which means that when they grow, there's a nice space for them to swell nicely, and then hopefully by late autumn through to winter, all the way to early spring, we'll be able to come out here and harvest our very own leeks. Because we've hardly had any rainfall for the past few weeks, the ground is extremely dry, and I'm not used to this, in all honesty. I was using the dibber, which when I found that when I was pushing it down into the ground, the soil just kept on filling back in to the hole, so I couldn't get the depth that I wanted to put the leek seedling into. So I've got something a bit more heavy duty to help me with this. and somehow, no idea why, it seems to be working a bit better. It's not perfect by all means, but it's about thinking about making things more efficient and effective. This is great when the soil has a bit more moisture, which bonds the soil particles together. However, the weight and sheer power behind this seems to be better at making a hole in dry conditions. I'm going to leave the leeks for now because it's getting on in the day and I've got to edit this video to come out tomorrow, so I'm not going to have much time. I'm going to leave the leeks for now because it's getting on. It's just coming up to 7:45 in the evening. But what I really want to share with you is what's currently going on with the Ruth Stout adaptation hay mulch bed. Don't know, if you can think of a concise way to say it, just let me know, that would be great. But yeah, there were some interesting things growing on. That was so easy, earthing up the potato plants. It barely took 5 minutes, and that's including getting the hay bale from down below at the small holding. And I just want to show you whilst we're here a couple of things. The first thing is how easy it is to weed. And in all honesty, I've done absolutely no work since I've planted these potatoes, and I'm allowing myself half an hour every week to work on this. And to be honest, I've probably stacked up hours where I haven't been able to do anything because I haven't needed to. But now there's a lot to do, so I'm going to show you how I'm going to weed this really easily. Two very simple methods. The first method is either using your hand to simply pull up any kind of shoots or weeds or anything you don't want to grow. And the second method is just to use more hay and mulch and smother over the weeds. And all that took well under 5 minutes, so I've got 20 minutes now to bring some plants out to transplant into the Ruth Stout method, because I'm going to be trialling some tomatoes and squash. I've just put the squash into their rough placings, and I'm not worrying too much about exactly how far or near they are to each other, because when we planted some squash at my school vegetable garden, we planted them pretty close together, and they still seem to do great. So hopefully this will cause an abundance. And any trailing ones, I'm going to experiment with moving them up onto and growing them up onto the bank behind. So I'm just going to try and use my hands, and if needed I will give them a bit of a water afterwards, but that's the only watering that I'm going to give them. So time to get them planted. All in all here, things seem to be going well, but the biggest struggle is the lack of water. And I don't think we've actually experienced a year like this where we've had so little water in such a crucial stage of growing our own food and for the vegetable garden. So what's really tricky is I told myself I wouldn't water this, but I'm really considering now that there might be an exception, because the kale is looking dry already, and also the squash are looking dry. And if I could just water them a bit and save them, to be honest, I think that's going to be a lot better than just leaving it and potentially losing them. What to do? Firstly, I just want to say I'm hoping that either late June through to early July, I'm going to make an actual garden tour to show you everything that's going on. I just want to draw attention though to the tomatoes. These are now looking really healthy. It was a bit funny when we transplanted them. They looked like they had some kind of disease or something, so we just took off the bottom leaves. We haven't seen it like that before, but now you would have no idea that 2 weeks ago these looked in a bit of a sorry state. So I'm trying out something different. I'm using landscape fabric here, and I burnt holes into it, and now they're looking really, really good. And the only thing we need to do now is to take off the suckers, because when you have quite a small space for growing tomatoes, I know a lot of people say to leave the suckers on, but in all honesty, with our climate, although this year is very much an exception, we really need to make sure that there's good airflow in here, because there's a door on one side of the solar tunnel and there's a door on the other side of the solar tunnel. But when you've got lots and lots of foliage, and especially with tomatoes and the potential of blight, it's really important that we do just take off the suckers, because we still get a lot of fruit, which we're really grateful for. And by taking off the suckers, it's meaning that there's less foliage, so there's more airflow and a reduced risk of having any kind of disease. thank you so much for watching, and I really look forward to seeing you again soon. And I'd love to know how your garden's growing, how your allotment's doing, and whether you're also struggling with weather. And I know there are some parts of the world which are having too much rain, and we've got too little rain. So if anyone wants to trade rain, I'd be very grateful. So yeah, see you again soon. Goodbye.